Hey everyone, Jason here from Griptape Nodes. OpenUSD is a universal format that a lot of creative tools use. We thought it would be interesting to integrate OpenUSD into Griptape Nodes using a MCP server, basically giving you the ability to interact with your USD scenes using agent-like control. And in this video, we're going to show you exactly how. We're going to take a reference image, we'll build some 3D geometry, we'll orient it, we'll position it, and we'll lay it all out, and even introduce variants, all using OpenUSD, an MCP server, and Griptape Nodes to manage the workflow. Let's dive in.
Okay, so the first step is going to be looking at this artwork and creating assets for each one of these items that are in the scene. So first we're generating the image. We go over to this describe image node, get a list of all the things in the image that we're going to be working with. Use our flex image generation node, create a nice 3D looking render of each one of those assets. We'll use some of our file manipulation nodes to just sort of move the file into the right location, and then we'll create a list of thumbnails of this. So this is going to iterate through every single one of those assets. This is our assets folder right here, and while it's running, we're just going to watch it generate the entire folder structure, and off we go. All right, and now that it's finished, here's a thumbnail with each one of the assets that is generated and all organized, ready to go into production. So the next stage is to take those art assets and generate these 3D USDZ assets. And to do that, we're going to use this node from Rodin, which is a Rodin 3D generator node. It's available as one of the Griptape library assets. I will put a link to that down in the description of this video. We feed it the image that we generated earlier. It will then go ahead and generate the asset, and then we just move it into the right location. And as you can see here, it's going to go in a model directory underneath the Apple asset. So we will kick off the generation, and then it'll just take a couple of minutes for it to generate each of these assets. Now it's finished running through those. We have artwork and we have the USD model. So there's the Apple, the backpack artwork, the backpack USDZ, the blue shoe artwork, the USDZ model, and the metal bucket here, and of course the pineapple USDZ. Now these are of course just starting points for actually taking the model. It's really cool that Rodin actually allows you to generate and export these USDZ files, and then using our workflow we're able to place the files exactly where we want into our normal structure. Now the challenge with each of these models is that when they're generated from Rodin, they're pointing Z up, but if you are a Maya user, then you know that that won't necessarily work for you. Here I've got Maya open, and I can go over to create a new USD stage, grab the model. You'll notice it is pointing the wrong direction. It's going along the Z axis that way, which is not what we want. In fact, let's go ahead and bring in the rest of these assets. And what you'll notice is that they are all pointing along the Z axis, and they are all at the exact same size. So when these assets are generated from Rodin, they are all at a size of basically a 1x1 cube. So what we're going to do is take our original USDZ files and then use Griptape Nodes and a MCP tool that can actually talk to USD to scale the model down and orient it correctly and save a USD asset for us. As you can see here, this is the Apple at the correct scale based off of the reference image. It's also at the correct orientation. And if you look at our layout over here, you can see we've got our original USDZ model right here. We've got a flattened USDA model, and the unique thing about this one, the up axis is Y, and then we also have our actual asset itself, which is Apple_asset. You'll notice it's a very clean USD asset with the default prim of the Apple asset. It's referencing our Apple USD file in a relative path, and it's got the transform ops for scale and translation already baked in over here. So anytime we use this model in our scene, it will be positioned and oriented like that. We want to do that for the rest of the models. So here's our workflow. The first thing we're doing is we're getting a list of all of the different models that we're going to be working on. We then take our reference image and we ask the describe image node to describe each item in scale in relationship to the other items. And we get a list that looks like this where we say the size of each one of these things. We then build up a prompt to give to an MCP task where I've chosen a very specific server, which is our USD server. And what you often see with MCPs is that you can basically give an agent like a whole bunch of MCPs to talk to, which is fantastic for sort of a chat interface. But when you're building out a pipeline and a workflow, it's really handy to be able to say, just do this one specific thing with my USD here, as opposed to giving it access to Maya and Blender and time and file and whatever, where a large language model could start getting confused. Here you could say, I'm just working on USD, so let me focus on that. And basically what we are saying is create an assembly by adding a reference to this file. Here are all the different transforms, scale it by the appropriate amount, tell it where I want it to save. So let's go ahead and run through all the rest of these and see what they look like. Alright, so it has finished creating all of the different files. Let's just go ahead and collapse these up. Okay, and you'll notice that every single asset that we have has an asset USDA file. Let's bring those into Maya and see what they look like. And they are all sized appropriately based off of the reference. Pretty cool that we've been able to build a workflow that uses an agent that uses an MCP tool for USD to be able to talk to and interact with my USD asset. One thing that you may notice about each of these assets is that they are positioned exactly in the middle of the floor plane, which is not necessarily what we want. What we actually want is for each of these assets to be up on the floor so the base is right down at the bottom. We can do that in Griptape Nodes using our MCP USD tool. Alright, so here I've got an MCP task and I'm asking it, can you tell me what the bounding box is for the Apple asset at this particular path? What it's going to do is use the USD MCP server and it'll find out what the bounding box is and come back with an answer. It says, alright, this is what the bounding box is for that apple. So then I can take the same agent and pass it to another MCP task. Can you add a transform op to the apple to move it up in Y so it's flat on the floor? So this will remember the context from the previous conversation, and it will go ahead and modify that value for me. So here you can see it moved it up, and if we jump back over into Maya and we go ahead and reload, you'll notice it pops up to be on the floor. So I didn't have to figure it out the size myself. I could just ask the agent to find the bounding box of the file and position it correctly, and then it will add the operation for me automatically. So that's one way of doing it in Griptape Nodes, is actually using a node to build out that workflow. You can also do this using the chat on the side. So if I open up this chat bar, I can choose my USD MCP server, and now when I'm chatting, I'll actually be interacting with that USD. Why don't we choose the backpack asset, because that's quite a bit below right over here. So we'll ask the exact same question. We will ask about the backpack, and we'll run that. So now this is actually using a regular chat-based interface. It's not nodal. This allows me to iterate and chat with this thing over time. It comes back with the answer. I'll say, can you use it to translate it up in Y? There we go. Let's go back and take a look in here in Maya and reload. And there we go. Now the backpack is sitting on the floor as well. So we can do the same thing for the rest of the assets and either build that into the pipeline and workflow itself, or we can just chat and interact with it. Maybe we want it to be slightly off to the side. Whatever it is you'd like to do, you just keep having that conversation with the agent until you get exactly what you want. All right, and there we go. Now all of the assets are sitting on the floor exactly as we need them to be. So now what we want to do is we want to take all the objects and position them in a layout file as if we were getting ready to work on a shot. And we're going to use this image to get us closer to it. We can use Griptape Nodes to build a flow to have an agent actually figure out where these things should be, and then use the MCP task to actually create that layout file. So here you can see we've got our load image, and then what I'm doing is I'm using this image bash node, which allows us to draw on top of images. I've placed a little axis here on top of the drawing, just using one of my brush layers, and this helps the agent understand sort of the distance and relationship between all the objects. And I pass that into the describe image node, and I tell it to carefully describe the position of each object in relationship to that axis, and it actually gives me the output and the position and rotation of the objects. Now this is just a rough estimate of where they need to be. We're just sort of saying like, get close just to get me started. And we give it to the MCP task. And so what this is going to do now is it's going to create the model assembly for me, and then it'll reference every single one of those prims, and then it'll start figuring out how to position them and layer in a transform op on top of it. So it's all doing this non-destructively, so we can go back in and make changes later to our assets, and it'll still flow through properly to the layout. So now you can see it has saved the layout scene. We've got the layout with the shoe and the apple and the bucket and the backpack. Let's take a look at the example image. Here you can see we've got the shoe, the apple, the bucket, and the pineapple should be next to the backpack. Let's check it out and see where it's in the scene. There's the pineapple right there. Oh, it's very close. It just happens to be just barely inside. And that's just because we didn't pass the scale of the backpack, so the MCP tool didn't know to take a look for it. But if we place these two next to each other, you can see pretty quickly we're able to get a good approximate position for each of these objects. And as a layout artist, I can then go in and tweak and fine tune based off of what the actual set is really going to look like. So it's great that we can interact with the agent to compose scenes and create layouts and move objects around. So let's go ahead and create a variant of the apple that has a byte out of it, and then use the MCP task with the USD server and ask an agent to just put that in as a variant for me. We've got the original apple artwork, and then I'm using Flux Context Pro to take the apple and create one with a byte out of it. We then go ahead and use Rodin again to generate the 3D model, and you can see we've got that rough model now with the byte taken out of it. Now, creating the variant actually takes two steps. The first step is to create that flattened asset assembly, like we've done with the other ones, where we take the USDZ file, we rotate it and make sure it's positioned correctly. So we're going to do the same thing here, and all we have to do is tell the MCP task agent to just create a flattened asset assembly named Applebitten. There we go. So now we've got our Applebitten. And then what we're going to do is just tell the agent to create a model variant, and we say we want an actual variant set. We're going to have the default, which references the original model, and then bitten, which references the Applebitten one. And there we go. It said the model variant has been added to the Apple asset, and it now has two variants, default and bitten. If we jump back into our layout back in Maya and we reload it, you'll notice that the Apple asset now has a byte out of it. And in fact, if I click on this, I can actually change the variant set by just going to either default or go to my variant and say bitten. So the great thing about this is that we can easily add variants to our assets just by asking the MCP task with an agent. Thank you very much. I hope you really enjoyed the walkthrough of using Griptape Nodes to actually interact with USD files through our MCP server, and how we can build out these assets both procedurally and dynamically using Griptape Nodes. Have a fantastic afternoon.